My brother slapped me across the face at his wedding in front of 300 guests because I refused to give him my yacht. He and his new wife thought everyone would laugh at my humiliation. Instead, a superior court judge in the crowd stood up, and their entire world came crashing down. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The ballroom was magnificent. It was a space I knew well. I had, in fact, been part of the advisory team on its renovation 5 years prior. The soaring ceilings, the acoustic paneling disguised as Art Deco reliefs, the way the light from the crystal chandeliers caught the gold leaf inlays, it was a masterpiece of modern design. And it was filled with 300 of my brother's newest and closest friends, along with a few bewildered family members, all gathered for his wedding to Louise. I sat at table 2, close enough to the head table to show respect, but far enough away to avoid the epicenter of Louise's frantic energy. The champagne was excellent, the sea bass was cooked to perfection, and I was genuinely, if cautiously, trying to feel joy for my brother Marcus. Then came the speeches. The best man, a guy from Marcus's dealership, gave a short, awkward speech about sales quotas. Louise's maid of honor gushed about Louise's vision and uncompromising taste. Then Marcus, my 40-year-old brother, stood up and tapped the microphone. He was flushed, his bow tie slightly askew. He beamed at his new bride, Louise, who was seated beside him, looking like a smug porcelain doll. "Wow, what a night," Marcus began, his voice echoing slightly. "Thank you all for coming. I am the luckiest man in the world. I have married the most beautiful, most brilliant woman I have ever met." Louise preened, blowing him a kiss. "And I'm so glad my big sister, Audrey, could make it," he continued, turning his gaze on me. I smiled and raised my glass. A few people clapped. Marcus chuckled, but it was a sharp, unpleasant sound. "Yeah, Audrey, my incredibly successful, incredibly rich sister." The air in the room shifted. The mood went from celebratory to tense. I kept the polite smile fixed on my face, but my stomach tightened. I knew my brother. I knew that tone. "You see," Marcus said, walking away from the head table and onto the dance floor, mic in hand, "Louise and I, we have big plans. Big, big plans. We're not like Audrey. We don't want to just hoard our success. We want to live." Louise clapped enthusiastically. "Tell them, honey." "But to live," Marcus went on, his eyes locking onto mine, "you need a vessel." He grinned, and a few of his friends from the dealership, already deep into their cups, laughed along, sensing a bit. "And my sister, my generous sister Audrey, has the perfect vessel. Don't you, Aud?" My smile faded. I set my glass down. I could feel the eyes of 300 people turning toward me. Judge Kevin Vance, a man who was practically an uncle to me and who was sitting at table 1, gave me a look of profound concern. "So, Audrey," Marcus said, his voice now a booming, theatrical demand, "Louise and I have decided. We're going to start our new life tomorrow. We'll be taking the Aria for our honeymoon. Indefinitely. So, as my wedding gift, my real, final wedding gift, where are the keys?" He held out his hand, palm up, expectant. The room was deathly quiet. This was not a joke. This was an ambush. This was the culmination of 6 months of escalating, insane demands. I slowly rose to my feet, smoothing the front of my silk dress. I kept my voice low, polite, but firm, as if speaking to a client who had just made an impossible request. "Marcus," I said, my voice carrying in the silence, "we discussed this. I am so happy for you. The $300,000 I gave you is for a down payment on a house or for any honeymoon you could possibly dream of. But the Aria is not a gift. It's not on the table. It was never on the table." Marcus's face, which had been stretched in an arrogant grin, collapsed. What did you say?" "I said no, Marcus," I repeated, still quietly. "I'm not giving you my boat. Now please sit down, you're embarrassing yourself." Louise let out a sound like a punctured tire. "How dare you?" she shrieked from the head table. Marcus looked at Louise, then at his snickering friends, and then back at me. His face contorted with a sudden, childish rage that I hadn't seen in years, not since I refused to co-sign for a failed nightclub venture. You selfish," he began, his voice trembling. He took 3 fast steps toward me. Before I could even process his movement, his hand arced through the air. Crack. The sound was shockingly loud in the silent ballroom. His open palm connected with my cheek, a flash of white-hot pain exploding across. My face, the force of it was staggering. It snapped my head to the side and sent me, and the delicate ballroom chair I had been leaning against, toppling backward onto the floor. I landed hard on my hip. For a half-second, the only sound in the room was the clatter of my chair on the marble, and a single, shocked gasp from Judge Vance's wife. I lay there, stunned, my cheek throbbing, looking up at the beautiful, acoustically perfect ceiling. I could see Marcus standing over me, breathing hard, his hand still raised. He looked shocked at his own actions, but then his eyes met Louise's. She was smirking. He thought this was his moment of triumph. He thought 300 people would see a spoiled, rich sister get her comeuppance. He thought they would laugh. No one laughed. The betrayal was so sudden, so absolute, it was worse than the physical sting. He had not just struck me. He had done it in front of my peers, my friends, and a man I considered a father figure, all to impress his new wife and steal an asset he had not earned. The silence that followed the slap was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The silence stretched for 1 second, 2, 3. It was a suffocating, absolute void, heavier than any sound. 300 guests were frozen, forks halfway to mouths, glasses paused in the air. All I could hear was the ringing in my own ears and the sharp, shallow breathing of my brother, who was still standing over me, his hand tingling from the impact. He looked down at me on the floor, his 46-year-old sister, the woman who had paid for his MBA, the woman who had bylaid him out of 2 separate foreclosures, and his expression wasn't remorse. It was a terrifying, smug justification. He had won. He had publicly dominated me. "Well," he stammered, trying to regain the jovial tone. "I guess that's a no then, huh?" He let out a forced, bark-like laugh, turning to his friends, expecting them to join in. Not a single person moved. Louise, from the head table, was the only one smiling. "Good one, baby," she called out, her voice slicing through the tension like a shard of glass. She needed that. I pushed myself up onto one elbow, my cheek burning, my hip aching from the fall. My mind, the architect's mind that lives on logic and structure, was frantically trying to build a framework for what had just happened. This wasn't a family squabble. This was a crime. "Marcus." The voice that spoke was not mine. It came from Table 1, and it was not loud, but it carried the effortless, unimpeachable authority of a man who had commanded a courtroom for 30 years. Judge Kevin Vance, his face a mask of cold fury, slowly pushed his chair back and stood to his full height. He was 65, with a shock of white hair, and in that moment he seemed 7 feet tall. He placed his napkin neatly on the table. He was not a guest anymore. He was the law. "Marcus," he repeated, his voice cutting through the ballroom. Every head snapped toward him. My brother, who had been puffing his chest out, visibly deflated. "Hey, Judge Vance, just a little family joke. You know how sisters can be." Judge Vance took 1 step toward him. "That was not a joke," he said, his tone flat and glacial. "That was assault. In some jurisdictions, with the fall, it could be battery causing bodily harm." Marcus froze, the color drained from his face. "What, Judge, come on, it's my wedding." "I am perfectly aware of where we are," Judge Vance said, his eyes never leaving my brother. He then looked at the wedding planner, who was hovering by the door, pale and holding a clipboard. "Ma'am, please call the hotel security, and then call the police." "No," Louise shrieked, jumping to her feet. "You can't, it's our party, he's a judge, he can't just do that." "Madam," Judge Vance said, not even gracing her with a glance, "a crime is a crime, regardless of the venue. And as a witness, I have a duty to report it." He finally turned his attention to me. He walked over and offered me his hand. I took it, and his grip was firm and steady. He pulled me to my feet with a gentle strength. "Audrey," he said softly, his eyes full of a deep paternal anger that was all on my behalf. "Are you all right? Do you need a doctor?" I touched my cheek, it was already swelling. I'm all right, Kevin, thank you." "Good," he said. He then turned back to Marcus, who now looked like a terrified child. Louise was frantically whispering to him, "Tell him to stop, make him stop." This was the immediate aftermath. The humiliation I expected to feel was being replaced by a cold, structural resolve. My brother and his new wife had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They had planned this. They had intended to humiliate me into submission, to use public shame to extort a multi-million-dollar asset. They thought this was just a family spat. They thought I was just Audrey, the pushover sister who always paid. They had forgotten that I am an architect, ID. Document everything. I understand contracts, liabilities, and legal structures better than they ever could. And as I stood there, holding my throbbing face, a single, clear thought cut through the pain. They had forgotten who I was. But more importantly, as Judge Kevin Vance pulled out his phone to, I presumed, call the police precinct directly, they had forgotten who was sitting at table 1. The trap wasn't one I had to set. It was one my brother had just gleefully and publicly walked right into. My humiliation was over. His was just beginning. This moment wasn't born in a vacuum. It was the culmination of a lifetime of resentment, a resentment I had foolishly mistaken for simple sibling rivalry. For as long as I could remember, I was the responsible one, and Marcus was the charming one. Our parents, good people but hopelessly traditional, had poured their modest resources into me, their brilliant daughter. I earned scholarships, went to a top-tier architecture school, and worked my way up from intern to associate to finally founder of my own firm. My firm specialized in sustainable, high-end properties, and my reputation for meticulous, innovative design had brought me a level of success I was both proud of and quiet about. The Aria, my custom-built yacht, wasn't a toy. It was the physical manifestation of my life's work, a 5-year project where I had designed every single bulkhead, every piece of reclaimed teak, every solar-powered system. It was my sanctuary. Marcus, on the other hand, had coasted. When our parents couldn't afford his tuition for a private university he had to attend, I paid it. When he graduated with a business degree and decided he was above an entry-level job, I supported him for a year. When he wanted to project success to get his job at the luxury car dealership, I co-signed the lease on his first BMW. To Marcus, my success wasn't my own. It was a family resource pool that he was entitled to tap. Then, a year ago, Louise entered the picture. I met her at a family dinner. She was all wide eyes, frosted pink lipstick, and endless, breathless compliments. "Oh, Audrey, your house, it's just everything. Marcus told me you were talented, but my God." She claimed to be a brand consultant, a vague title that, as far as I could tell, meant she took artistic photos of expensive lunches for an audience of 1,200 followers. Her obsession with my life was immediate and unnerving. She didn't ask what I did. She asked what things cost. What was the square footage of my home? Was my car leased or owned? How many weeks a year did I use the Aria? It was Louise who found the promise. One night, over wine, Marcus was complaining about his commissions. "I'll never get ahead," he whined. "I'll be 40 and still renting." Trying to be encouraging, I had laughed and said, "Don't be so dramatic. You're doing fine. When you finally get married, you can borrow the Aria for your honeymoon. Go to Greece. You'll feel better." It was a throwaway line, a kind gesture. To Louise, it was a verbal contract. 6 months ago, when they announced their engagement, the texts began. At first, they were just excited. "Louise, so excited to take the Aria to Greece, just like you promised, Roman 20. I corrected her gently. "Audrey, happy to lend it to you for 2 weeks, guys. Just let me know the date so I can coordinate with my captain." A week later, the first shift. "Marcus, Louise was thinking Greece is too cliché. We're thinking a 6-month full Mediterranean tour. That's cool, right? Since it's our honeymoon. Audrey, Marcus, I can't lend you the boat for 6 months. It requires a full-time crew, and the operating costs are astronomical. I offered 2 weeks. Marcus, wow, way to be selfish. What are operating costs to you? It's like a rounding error. I ignored that. Then, 2 months ago, the real demand. They came to my design studio, unannounced, on a busy Tuesday. Louise did all the talking. Audrey, she said, sitting at my conference table as if she were a client. We've been thinking, a loan is just. It's messy, and frankly, it's a little insulting. Insulting, I repeated, my pen hovering over a blueprint. Yes, it's like you're still treating Marcus like a child, she said, placing her hand on his. We're a power couple. We have a brand to build, and a boat that isn't ours just doesn't fit our narrative. I stared at her. What are you talking about? Marcus and I have decided that for our wedding gift, instead of just lending us the aria, you're just going to give it to us, Louise said, with a bright, empty smile. We've already talked to a broker. A gift is cleaner. We'll take ownership, use it for a year to build our travel brand, and then probably sell it to fund our next venture. I was so stunned, I actually laughed. Louise, that boat is worth over $12 million. I am not giving you my boat. Marcus's face darkened. Why not, Otter? Why, you never even use it. You're always working. What's the point of having all that money if you don't help your family? Helping you, I said, my voice turning cold, is not the same as liquidating my most significant personal asset for you. The answer is no. It is absolutely, unequivocally no. That was when the real ugliness started. The harassing calls, the texts calling me a selfish hag, the accusations to our parents that I was hoarding the family wealth. I finally decided to end it. I wired $300,000 to a joint account for them. I sent them a card. For your honeymoon or a down payment on a house, please enjoy, but the aria is not and will never be a gift. This is my final word on the matter. I thought that would be it. I thought the sheer, staggering generosity of a $300,000 gift would shut them down. Instead, they saw it as an insult. Louise, I later learned, told Marcus it was chump change and a slap in the face. And so, as I stood in that ballroom, my cheek stinging, I realized the slap I just received wasn't spontaneous. It was premeditated. It was the slap in the face Louise felt she had received, delivered via my brother's hand. It was their grand, public finale designed to break me. But I don't break, I build. And as Judge Vance led me out of that ballroom, past the stunned faces of 300 guests and the horrified, finally dawning comprehension on my brother's face, I wasn't just a victim. I was an architect, and I was already drawing up the blueprints for what came next. The cool night air hit my throbbing cheek, and the shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, crystalline fury. The chaotic sounds of the reception, a DJ belatedly cutting the music, Louise's high-pitched wail of "You're ruining my wedding," faded behind us as Judge Vance wordlessly led me through the hotel's grand lobby. He didn't stop until we were in the quiet, carpeted corridor leading to the valet. Kevin, I started, but my voice was shaky. He stopped and turned to me, his expression no longer the fiery judge, but the concerned friend who had held me on his shoulders at a family barbecue 35 years ago. Let me see, he said, gently tilting my chin toward the light. He winced. That's going to be a significant bruise, Audrey. We need to get you ice, and we need to get a statement. A statement, I said, feeling numb. Kevin, it's Marcus, it's my brother. It was your brother, he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. The man who did that is a criminal. Family doesn't get a pass on assault. He pulled out his phone. I know the precinct captain in this district. I'm not calling as a judge, I'm calling as a witness to a felony. This was the turning point. Part of me, the responsible sister part that was so deeply ingrained, wanted to go home, lock the door, and just cry, to let the humiliation wash over me and then, eventually, sweep it under the rug, just as I had swept Marcus's debts and failures under the rug for 2 decades. But seeing Kevin's resolute anger, his absolute conviction, extinguished that impulse. He was right. This was not a family disagreement. This was a violent act of extortion. "You're right," I said, my voice hardening. "Make the call." While he spoke in low, concise terms to the police, I stood there, my mind clicking into place. I am a designer. My entire career is built on seeing a problem, anticipating the stresses, and designing a structure that can withstand them. Louise and Marcus were a problem, and I had been ignoring the stress they were putting on my life's foundation. When Judge Vance hung up, he looked at me. "They're sending a car. They'll meet us at the downtown precinct. It's better to do it there, away from this," he gestured back toward the ballroom. "It will be faster, and it will be taken more seriously." "Okay," I said. "Thank you, Kevin, for everything, for standing up." "Nonsense," he grumbled. "I'm only sorry I didn't stand up faster." He then flagged down a hotel attendant for an ice pack, which I pressed to my face, wincing at the cold sting. As we waited for the police car, I made a call of my own. I called my personal lawyer, a man who had structured all my contracts and set up Aria Holdings, LLC. It was 10:30 p.m. on a Saturday. He picked up on the second ring. "Audrey, is everything okay?" "Paul, I'm sorry to call so late. Something has happened. I'm at my brother's wedding, and he just assaulted me in front of the entire reception." "He what?" Paul's voice went from sleepy to razor-sharp. "He slapped me and knocked me to the floor. Judge Kevin Vance is with me. We're on our way to file a police report." I gave him the short version, the demands for the aria, the $300,000 gift, and the public confrontation. "Good God," Paul said. "Okay, filing the report is the right move, the only move. This protects you, and it protects the asset. Judge Vance's witness testimony is ironclad." "That's what I want to talk about," I said, pacing the corridor. "The asset. Louise, his new wife, is the one driving this. She's threatened to ruin me, to go after my clients, my reputation. She's unhinged." "Right," Paul said. "Let them. Any attempt to slander you to your clients is defamation and tortious interference. We can shut that down instantly." "I want to be proactive," I said, a new, cold energy filling me. "She claims to be a brand consultant. I want to know who she is. I want to know everything. As an architect, I would never build on an untested foundation. I was done letting Louise operate in my life without a full survey." "I'll have our investigator run a full background check on her first thing Monday," Paul promised. "Socials, credit, legal, the works. If she has a history, we'll find it." "Thank you, Paul." "And Audrey," he said, his voice firm, "don't talk to Marcus. Don't talk to Louise. Don't talk to your parents until you've given your statement. From now on, they talk to me. Is that clear?" "Crystal," I said and hung up. The police car, a quiet, unmarked sedan, pulled up to the hotel entrance. Judge Vance opened the back door for me. As I slid in, the weight of the night finally settled on me, but it was no longer just humiliation. It was the heavy, solid weight of resolve. Marcus and Louise had planned their attack. They had assumed I was a soft target. They had assumed that family meant I was their permanent, personal safety net. They had forgotten that safety nets are for accidents. They are not for people who jump on purpose, intending to break the very person holding them. The investigation had begun. The structure of their future was about to be condemned. Filing the report was a surreal, out-of-body experience. Judge Vance sat beside me, a silent, powerful presence, as I recounted the evening's events to a detective who seemed to grow increasingly grim. The officer taking the photographs of my face, my cheek now a mottled, swelling purple and red, was gentle and apologized for the flash. Judge Vance gave his own statement, a concise, devastatingly clear account from a judicial witness, which the detective read back with raised eyebrows. We were finished by 2 a.m. I slept for 3 hours and woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only a deep, aching throb in my face and my heart. My phone was a wasteland. Dozens of missed calls from my parents, who had presumably been alerted by a frantic Marcus. A string of texts from Marcus himself, oscillating wildly between, "How could you ruin my wedding?" and "Audrey, pick up, we can fix this," and finally, a chillingly cold, "You will regret this." But I didn't have time to dwell. I was meeting a new client at my studio at 9 a.m., and I would not let my brother's meltdown derail my business. I was in my office, a clean, glass-walled space overlooking the city, going over blueprints for a coastal home when my assistant buzzed me. "Audrey, your brother and a woe. Man are here, they don't have an appointment and they're being very insistent." "It's fine, Clara," I said, my voice steady. "Send them in." The doors to my studio hissed open, and in walked Marcus and Louise. They were not dressed for an apology. They were wearing matching, expensive-looking sunglasses, and both were holding large coffees. Louise was in a white sundress, as if she were still the blushing bride. Marcus looked haggard, but his jaw was set in stubborn anger. "You need to call them," Marcus said, not even bothering with a hello. He ripped his sunglasses off. "You need to call the police right now and drop that ridiculous report." I leaned back in my chair, deliberately not standing. I simply looked at him, my bruised face on full display. "No." "What did you say?" he snapped. I said no, I will not be dropping the report. You assaulted me, Marcus. That's not something we fix. That's a crime. "It was a slap," Louise chimed in, stepping forward. "My God, you're being so dramatic. He was drunk. It was his wedding. You embarrassed him. You embarrassed me." I turned my cool gaze to her. "You are not welcome in my office, Louise. You are not welcome in my life. You need to leave." "We're not leaving," Marcus said, planting his hands on my desk, scattering a set of my carefully arranged drafting pencils. "We're not leaving until you fix this. You've already given your statement or whatever. Just call them and remember what happened. Say you were drunk and you fell. Say anything. Just make it go away." "So," I said, steepling my fingers, "you're not here to apologize for the assault. You're here to ask me to commit a crime, to file a false report." "It's not," Marcus sputtered, "it's just fixing a family problem." This was it. This was the moment. The arrogance, the total lack of remorse, the sheer, unmitigated entitlement, it was all so clear. "Sit down," I said. It was not a request. Surprised by my tone, they both hesitated. And then, like disobedient children, they sat in the two Eames chairs opposite my desk. "You came here for the aria," I said. "You assaulted me for the aria. You are here, demanding I lie to the police for the aria. You have built your entire future on this one, single asset." "It's what you promised," Louise hissed. "I promised nothing," I said, my voice like ice. "But you two are so blinded by your greed that you didn't even bother to do 5 minutes of research." I swiveled in my chair to my computer, pulled up a file, and turned the large monitor toward them. On the screen was a PDF, the Articles of Incorporation for Aria Holdings, LLC. Marcus squinted. "What is this? More of your boring work stuff?" "That," I said, "is the legal owner of the aria. It's a limited liability company. It's not my personal property. It's a corporate asset held by my holding company for insurance, liability, and tax purposes." Louise looked confused. "So, just sign it over. The company, the boat, whatever." I almost laughed. "You really are that dense, aren't you? Louise, if I, the sole officer of this LLC, were to gift its only asset, a $12 million asset, to a family member for zero consideration, do you know what that's called?" I leaned forward. "It's called corporate malfeasance. It's called tax fraud. It's the kind of thing that doesn't just trigger a fine, it triggers a full-blown federal audit of me, my company, and the recipient of the fraudulent gift. It's the kind of thing that can get a professional license, like, say, an architect's license, revoked. It's the kind of thing that can lead to jail." I let the words hang in the air. Marcus was pale. Louise was, for the first time, speechless. "You didn't just ask for a boat," I said, turning the monitor back to myself. "You demanded I commit a felony. You assaulted me because I refused to commit a felony for you. So no, Marcus, I'm not calling the police to drop the charges. In fact, I've already spoken to my lawyer. He's very interested in this conversation. I gestured to the small speakerphone on my desk, where a tiny green light was illuminated. This is Paul Anton, counsel for Ms. Audrey. Paul's voice suddenly filled the room, crisp and professional. Marcus, I have a recording of this entire conversation, including your request for my client to file a false police report. That's witness tampering. I'd advise you and your wife to leave the premises immediately before I add that to the complaint. Louise shot out of her chair as if it were on fire. You recorded us. You are in a private place of business, and you were informed you were not welcome, Paul's voice replied. Get out. Marcus stared at me, his eyes wide with a new kind of terror. The anger was gone, replaced by the dawning, sickening realization that this was not a family argument. It was a legal battlefield, and he had just shown up with a water pistol while I was sitting in a tank. Audrey, he whispered, please. Get out of my studio, Marcus, I said, my voice flat. Get out now. They practically ran for the door. As it hissed shut behind them, I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding. The confrontation was over. The first pieces on the board had been set, and I had just taken their queen. The recording of Marcus's attempt at witness tampering was, as my lawyer Paul put it, a gift. It was immediately sent to the district attorney's office, along with a formal request for a restraining order against both Marcus and Louise. The assault charge was now rock solid, and the DA, smelling an easy, high-profile conviction thanks to a judge's testimony, was pursuing it aggressively. Louise, however, did not go quietly. She was a cornered animal, and she came out lashing. 2 days after the disastrous studio confrontation, her smear campaign began. She took to social media, her primary weapon, with a vengeance. She posted a tearful, black-and-white video on her Instagram. I've been quiet for days, she sniffled, her wedding makeup artfully smudged. I've been trying to keep the peace for my new husband, but I can't stay silent anymore about his monster of a sister, Audrey. The post was public. She didn't use my last name, but she tagged my firm's official business account. She ruined our wedding, Louise wept to her 1,200 followers. Just because we asked to borrow her precious boat. She had her judge friend call the police and she's trying to have Marcus jailed, all over a stupid boat. She's a liar, she's selfish, and she hates her family. Please don't support her business. She doesn't deserve it. The comments were a predictable mix of OMG, stay strong, from her clueless friends and a few confused what?s. Paul had it taken down in under an hour. A sharply worded cease and desist letter was messengered to her apartment, citing defamation per se and tortious interference with business. The letter informed her that any further mention of me or my firm would result in an immediate civil suit seeking damages. But she had already done me a favor. Her public post was all the evidence Paul needed for the building a case, part of our plan. While Louise was busy committing career suicide on social media, Paul's investigator had finished his report. And it was devastating. Our girl Louise is not just a brand consultant, Paul said over the phone that afternoon. She's a serial debtor with a pattern. She has over $80,000 in credit card debt across 6 cards. She was sued 2 years ago by a former boyfriend for unpaid loans totaling $30,000. The suit was settled out of court. Before him, an apartment complex in another state won a default judgment against her for $15,000 in unpaid rent and damages. So, she's not just a manipulator, I said, rubbing my temples. She's a professional. She's a predator, Audrey, Paul said grimly. She finds men she thinks have access to money, burns through them, and moves on. Marcus was her ticket to the big leagues. She saw you and the aria as the jackpot. My heart ached for my brother. He was a fool, yes. He was weak and entitled and now violent, but he was also a victim. He was a tool for this woman to get to me. This brought us to the second, more difficult confrontation, our parents. They had been calling me nonstop, leaving tearful, angry messages. How can you do this to your brother? You're tearing this family apart. He made a mistake. I had agreed to meet them at their house, but on my terms. I would not be alone with Marcus. I would come, present my side, and leave. I arrived on Sunday, a week after the wedding. My bruise had faded to a sickly yellow-green. My parents met me at the door, their faces etched with worry. "Audrey, thank God," my mother said, trying to hug me. I stiffened, and she pulled back. "Where is he?" I asked. "He's in the kitchen," my father said, his voice heavy. "He and Louise they're a mess. This is killing them, Audrey. You have to stop this." "I am not stopping anything," I said, walking into the living room. "I am the victim, remember." Marcus and Louise were sitting on the couch, looking like sulking teenagers. The moment Louise saw me, her eyes narrowed with pure, unadulterated hatred. She spat, "you got my Instagram shut down." "That was my lawyer," I said calmly. "And that's just the beginning if you don't stop. Now I'm here to talk to Mom and Dad." I turned to my parents. "I know you're upset. I know you think I'm being cruel, but you don't know the whole story. You only know the one they've been telling you." "He's your brother," my mother cried. "He's facing jail, Audrey, over a slap." "It wasn't over a slap, Mom," I said, my voice rising. "It was over this." I took the investigator's report from my bag and tossed it on the coffee table. "What is this?" my father asked. "That," I said, "is a background check on my new sister-in-law. Go ahead, read it." My parents stared at the papers. Marcus lunged for it, but I snatched it away. "Not for you, Marcus. This is for them." I handed the first page to my father. He put on his reading glasses and began to read. His face went from confused to ashen. My God, $80,000 in debt, sued by an ex-boyfriend. "She's a con artist, Dad," I said, my voice breaking just a little. "She's been targeting men for money for at least 5 years. Marcus wasn't her partner, he was her stepping stone. To me, to my money, to my boat." "That's a lie," Louise shrieked, jumping to her feet. "It's all lies. Tell them, Marcus. Tell them how much you love me." Marcus was staring at the paper in my father's hand, his face a mask of disbelief. "Louise, what is this? Settlement? $30,000. "It's nothing, baby," she insisted, her voice frantic. "It's my past. It doesn't matter. What matters is us. What matters is that your sister is trying to destroy our future." "What future, Louise?" I cut in. "The future where you sell my boat and leave him, because that's what was going to happen." "Marcus," my mother whispered, her eyes full of tears as she read the report. Is this true? Did you know about this?" Marcus looked at Louise, then at the report, then at me. He was trapped. The entire narrative, that I was the selfish, cruel one, had just been obliterated by a few sheets of paper. The spell was breaking. You told me he was a stalker," Marcus said to Louise, his voice trembling. "You told me that lawsuit was fake." "He was," Louise screamed. "They're all liars, and so are you." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You did this, you." She was out of words. Her entire arsenal of manipulation was gone. She was exposed. In front of the family she was trying to fleece, and the man she had used as a battering ram. Marcus, finally, looked at me. The anger was gone, replaced by a dawning, bottomless horror. He wasn't just seeing the legal trouble he was in. He was seeing, for the first time, the woman he had married, and he was seeing the sister he had betrayed. The fight was over. Louise knew it. She grabbed her purse. I'm not staying here for this." She stormed out of the house, slamming the front door behind her. Marcus didn't follow. He just sank back onto the couch and put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. My parents looked at him, then at me, their faces a roadmap of confusion and grief. The antagonist's spell was broken, but the consequences were just beginning. The day of the first court appearance arrived 2 weeks later. It wasn't a trial, just a preliminary hearing, but the stakes felt immense. I walked into the Superior Courthouse, my lawyer Paul at my side. My parents were already there, sitting in the back row, looking small and defeated. Then Marcus arrived. He was alone. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his suit was rumpled, and he hadn't shaved. He was a man completely adrift. He saw me, and his eyes were a mixture of shame, fear, and a desperate plea. He started to walk toward me. "Don't," Paul said quietly, putting a hand on my arm. "The restraining order is in effect." Marcus stopped, wringing his hands, and shuffled into the front row to sit with his public defender. Louise was nowhere to be seen. "All rise," the bailiff called out. We stood. The judge entered and my stomach dropped. It wasn't Judge Vance, of course it wouldn't be, as he was a witness, but it was a judge I recognized. Judge Maria Santos, known for her no-nonsense, by-the-book approach. "Calling case 774B, the People versus Marcus," the bailiff said. Marcus and his lawyer stood. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 30s, stood as well. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, "the people are pursuing the maximum charge of battery. The defendant, at his own wedding reception, in front of 300 witnesses, violently struck his sister, the victim, Ms. Audrey, causing her to fall and sustain injury." The public defender sighed. "Your Honor, this is a family matter. A tragic one-time misunderstanding fueled by alcohol at a wedding. My client is deeply remorseful. He's a 40-year-old man with no prior offenses. A battery charge is excessive. We believe this should be a simple misdemeanor, deferred with anger management." Judge Santos looked over her glasses at Marcus. "A misunderstanding? I have the police report here. I have the photographs of the victim's face. It looks like more than a misunderstanding to me." "And Your Honor," the prosecutor added, "we have more. The people would like to submit this." She handed a file to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "This is a sworn witness affidavit from the Honorable Judge Kevin Vance, who not only witnessed the assault but was the one to report it. He describes the act as willful, malicious, and entirely unprovoked." A murmur went through the courtroom. Judge Santos's eyebrows shot up. She read the statement, her expression hardening. "A sitting judge is the primary witness," she said, looking at the public defender. "And he used the word malicious." "Judge Vance is a family friend, Your Honor," the public defender stammered, clearly blindsided. "He's biased." "Biased?" Judge Santos snapped. "Or an expert witness to the law? I've known Judge Vance for 20 years. He is not a man given to hyperbole. This affidavit is extremely compelling." The prosecutor wasn't finished. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence of witness tampering. The defendant and his wife, Ms. Louise, approached the victim at her place of business 2 days after the assault, demanding she file a false report and recant her statement. We have a recording of this, provided by the victim's counsel." That was the knockout blow. The public defender's face went white. Judge Santos slammed the file shut. "Witness tampering," she said, her voice dripping with contempt as she stared at Marcus. "You assaulted your sister in front of a judge, and then you tried to get her to lie to the police about it." Marcus trembled, looking desperately at me. "I didn't. She made me." "Mr. Marcus," the judge said, "you are in a very, very deep hole, and you seem intent on digging faster. Given this affidavit and the new evidence of tampering, the people's request for the maximum charge is not only reasonable, it's practically required." And just like that, the showdown I had been bracing for was over. It hadn't been a dramatic confrontation in a public place. It had been a quiet, systematic legal dissection in a half-empty courtroom. The judge set a date for the plea. The public defender, knowing he had no case, told Marcus his only option was to plead guilty and beg for mercy. I stood up and Paul gathered his things. As I turned to leave, I saw her. "Louise." She was standing in the back of the courtroom, by the door, having slipped in late. She was not wearing designer clothes. She was in jeans and a cheap-looking top, her hair a mess, her face pale with fury. She had clearly been waiting for me. As I walked into the hallway, she burst through the doors after me. "You," she shrieked, and the sound echoed off the marble walls. You did this, you ruined everything. She lunged at me, her hands clawed, aiming for my face. I didn't even flinch, I just stepped aside. Paul blocked her, and before she could even get close, 2 courthouse bailiffs had her by the arms. That's her, I heard Marcus yell from behind us. He had run out of the courtroom, his face a mask of frantic realization. He wasn't yelling at me, he was yelling to me. That's her, Audrey, she's the one, she planned all of it. She told me to hit you. She said everyone would laugh. It was a final, pathetic, desperate act of self-preservation, but it was also the truth. He was throwing his wife to the wolves to save himself. Louise, held fast by the bailiffs, seemed to collapse. Her final, public humiliation was complete. She had lost. She had lost the boat, she had lost her brand, and she had just lost her husband. Get her off me, she screamed, but there was no fight left. It was the sound of a hollowed out shell. The bailiffs dragged H. Still screaming, toward the security desk. Marcus stood there in the middle of the hallway, a man utterly broken. He had built his entire world around this woman, and he had just set the match to it himself. He looked at me, his eyes empty. Audrey, he whispered. I just shook my head. Paul put his hand on my back and guided me toward the exit. I didn't look back. The fallout was swift and total. Marcus, on the advice of his public defender, pled guilty to battery and misdemeanor witness tampering. Judge Santos was not lenient. She handed him 2 years of probation, a $10,000 fine paid directly to a domestic violence shelter, and 500 hours of community service. The real punishment, however, was the 52 weeks of mandatory, court-ordered anger management and individual therapy. His luxury car dealership, which operated on an image of class and trustworthiness, fired him the day his conviction was finalized. The scandal, amplified by the involvement of a judge and the salacious details of the aria, was too much for their brand. Louise was the true casualty. Her final, desperate lunge at me in the courthouse earned her a night in jail and her own assault charge, which was dropped only because I declined to press it. It didn't matter. Her creditors, alerted to her legal troubles and the public implosion of her marriage, pounced. The civil suits that Paul's investigator had uncovered were reactivated. She was sued by the credit card companies, the apartment complex, and most satisfyingly, by the ex-boyfriend she had scammed. She and Marcus had their marriage annulled. She disappeared from the state, presumably to find a new town, a new name, and a new victim. My parents were heartbroken. They had not only seen their son convicted of a crime, but they had been forced to see the truth about his character, and the character of the woman they had welcomed into their family. Our relationship is strained, but we are slowly, cautiously rebuilding. They are in therapy now, too, trying to understand their own role in enabling Marcus's behavior for 4 decades. And then there was Marcus. 6 months after the conviction, I received a letter. It was handwritten on simple, lined paper. It was from him. It was not a demand or a whine or a justification. It was just 12 pages of a man finally, agonizingly, taking inventory of his life. He was working a minimum wage job at a hardware store. He was living in a tiny, 1-bedroom apartment. He was, he wrote, attending his therapy sessions twice a week. He detailed his jealousy, his deep-seated insecurity, his weakness. He explained how Louise had preyed on those exact things, promising him a life where he could finally be me instead of just being my brother. He wrote that he didn't expect me to forgive him. He didn't deserve it. He just wanted to, for the first time in his life, tell the truth and apologize for the man he had been. I read the letter, and then, for the first time since the wedding, I cried. I cried for the brother I had and the brother I had lost. The restraining order is still in place, but I wrote him back, a simple 2-line card. I am glad you are getting help. Keep going. It is a start. Today, the aria is anchored in a quiet, turquoise cove. The water is so clear I can see the sandbar 20 feet below. I'm sitting on the aft deck, a large sketchpad in my lap, a pencil behind my ear. The sun is warm, and the only sound is the gentle lapping of the water against the hull. My firm just landed the biggest project of its career, a fully sustainable, carbon-neutral resort in Costa Rica. I am here, on my boat, my sanctuary, doing the first preliminary sketches. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Judge Vance. Anchored off Catalina, waters are calm, thinking of you, proud of you. I smiled and texted back. All is well, Kevin, sketching the future. It looks beautiful from here. I put the phone down, picked up my pencil, and got back to work. The slap, the courtroom, the betrayal, it all felt 1,000 miles away. They were just stress points in the old design. I had weathered them. The foundation had held, and I was already building something new.